What if I told you that two men, born worlds apart, redefined terrorism, not just as violence, but as a global business? One became a media icon, the other, a ghost no one dared mention. Their names shook governments and changed how the world thinks about fear. But what truly set them apart, and what lessons do their stories hold for our fractured present? Stay with me. Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening. Two men, two faces of terror, one haunting legacy. On a freezing morning in December 1975, the world stood still. In the heart of Vienna, 6 armed militants stormed the headquarters of OPEC, taking more than 60 hostages, including 11 oil ministers. At the center of the chaos was a man who seemed to drink in the attention, Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, a Venezuelan revolutionary better known as Carlos the Jackal. Dressed in a turtleneck, sunglasses, and smug defiance, he moved through the corridors not like a terrorist, but like a man auditioning for history. He demanded $50 million and a plane, declaring solidarity with the Palestinian cause. But his true target wasn't political. It was the front page. Fast forward exactly 10 years. December 1985. Chaos erupts once again, this time not in boardrooms but airport terminals. Rome and Vienna linked by blood. Machine guns tear through innocent travelers. 19 dead. Over 140 wounded. The man behind it isn't smiling. There are no press briefings, no manifestos, only silence and shrapnel. His name, Sabri al-Banna, better known by his nom de guerre, Abu Nidal, the founder of the most feared Palestinian splinter group of the 1980s. His faction didn't see themselves as freedom fighters. They had a darker self-image. They called themselves al-Fatah, al-Muwajaha al-Musalaha, the Fatah, the armed struggle. But the world knew them by a more chilling title, the Destroyers. In a decade already poisoned by hijackings and hostage dramas, Carlos and Abu Nidal didn't just participate, they reshaped the very architecture of modern terrorism. But what's chilling is not just their brutality, it's how differently they operated. Carlos was a Marxist celebrity, a man who weaponized charisma as much as Kalashnikovs. The 1975 OPEC raid was a geopolitical theater. 3 days, 11 countries involved, and a final payout estimated at $20 million, equivalent to nearly $100 million today. He played to the cameras, autographed manifestos, and lived under the protection of Cold War patrons who saw value in keeping him alive. Abu Nidal, on the other hand, lived in the shadows and bled in silence. His attacks weren't strategic. They were often irrational, obsessive, and cruel. He orchestrated over 90 attacks across 20 countries, targeting not just enemies, but suspected defectors, diplomats, even bystanders. Where Carlos calculated headlines, Abu Nidal trusted in no one, not even his own lieutenants. Betrayal, real or imagined, was a death sentence, and yet both men reflect the same truth. By the 1980s, terrorism had evolved. It was no longer just an act of political desperation. It had become a profession, even a commodity, one fueled by ideology and ego, the other by paranoia and purges. Together, they etched a question into the walls of history. When does revolution become business? And when does the business of fear lose all meaning? By the late 1970s, terrorism had ceased to be spontaneous. It was now strategized, funded, and franchised. Two men stood at the epicenter of this transformation, Carlos the Jackal and Abu Nidal. Not merely terrorists, but engineers of political violence. Carlos, ever the tactician of spectacle, understood the value of performance. His attacks were choreographed disruptions, calculated not for body count, but for global resonance. The 1975 OPEC raid wasn't just a hostage crisis, it was a live experiment in geopolitical manipulation. Over 50 attacks are attributed to him, yet the confirmed fatalities hover under 80. His signature, maximum pressure, minimum blood. His goal, destabilize regimes without alienating his base of support or sponsors. His operational model relied heavily on Cold War safe havens. East Germany granted him identity papers. Syria offered sanctuary. The Soviet bloc, while never fully endorsing him, provided a permissive shadow in which he thrived. His persona, half revolutionary, half rock star, turned him into a myth. He granted interviews, smuggled messages from safe houses, signed manifestos like they were vinyl records. For intelligence services, Carlos was both a threat and an enigma, a narcissist masked as a militant. French psychologists later diagnosed him with traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder, driven less by Marxist dogma than by a deep-seated hunger for recognition. Abu Nidal, by contrast, weaponized paranoia. He wasn't chasing headlines, he was hunting ghosts. His organization, the Abu Nidal Organization, ANO, functioned more like a clandestine state than a rebel faction. Strict internal hierarchy, compartmentalized cells, and a leadership style rooted in fear. Between 1974 and 2002, his group executed over 90 attacks, leaving 300 confirmed dead, including diplomats, airline passengers, journalists, and even his own operatives. Where Carlos mastered the psychology of governments, Abu Nidal mastered the terror of silence. His network spread across Libya, Iraq, Lebanon, and Eastern Europe. But unlike Carlos, he inspired no loyalty, only fear. Iraq funded him until his violence became too erratic. Libya sheltered him, then expelled him. He was known to execute aides over whispers of betrayal, often after self-written confessions under torture. Internal documents recovered after the fall of Baghdad revealed a pattern of purges within ANO resembling Stalinist show trials, but conducted in basements with no audience. Strategically, Carlos saw terrorism as asymmetric diplomacy, a language to speak to power when traditional diplomacy failed. Abu Nidal saw it as eradication, a scorched earth tactic where the line between enemy and ally dissolved. He once declared, "Whoever is not with us is against us, and whoever is against us must die." And yet, beneath their diverging styles lay a shared truth. Both men were sponsored instruments of state power. Neither could have operated without geopolitical backing. Carlos was a Cold War avatar. Abu Nidal, a pawn in Ba'athist games. Their operations, while draped in ideology, were logistical products of intelligence cooperation, arms smuggling, and oil money laundering. It wasn't ideology that made them lethal, it was infrastructure. And that, perhaps, is the most chilling shift of all. These weren't lone wolves or fringe radicals. They were the early CEOs of transnational violence, managing personnel, fundraising through extortion, recruiting from refugee camps and prisons. Their terror was scalable, their methods exportable. In this new age, terror wasn't born in caves. It was built in boardrooms, nurtured in embassies, and negotiated through back channels. Their tactics didn't just forecast modern insurgencies, they institutionalized them. Carlos with his political theater, Abu Nidal with his murder bureaucracy. And still, one question lingered behind every detonation, every gunshot, every televised threat. How much of this violence was truly their own, and how much was subcontracted rage from nations too cowardly to act openly? By the end of the 20th century, the age of Carlos the Jackal and Abu Nidal was collapsing under its own contradictions. What began as political theater and state-sponsored vendetta unraveled into a bitter truth. Violence without vision consumes its creators. Carlos, once a jet-setting poster boy of Third World Revolution, found his empire of spectacle undone not by firepower, but by bureaucracy. In 1994, after 2 decades evading capture, he was betrayed by the most mundane of breadcrumbs, his girlfriend's phone records. Tracked to Sudan, he was handed over to French intelligence in a covert operation that signaled a shift in how the West viewed transnational terror, not as a military threat, but a judicial challenge. His trial in Paris became a legal landmark, reinforcing the doctrine of universal jurisdiction, the idea that terrorism knows no borders, and justice must cross them as well. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he remains, not as a legend, but a legal precedent. Abu Nidal's fall was not televised. He vanished into the paranoia he had long inflicted on others. By 2002, exiled in Baghdad and seen as a liability by Saddam Hussein's regime, he was found dead, 2 bullets to the head. The official story claimed suicide, but few doubted he had been executed by Iraqi agents. There was no funeral, no martyrdom, no last manifesto, just silence. His once vast network had collapsed, and after 9/11, his brand of indiscriminate violence was no longer strategic. It was a liability even to the regimes that had once funded it. He had become obsolete in a world that was now obsessed with Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, and the war on terror. The contrast in their endings is telling. Carlos, ever the showman, faded into trial transcripts and prison memoirs. Abu Nidal, ever the executioner, disappeared into unmarked graves and classified files. One became a relic, the other a redacted ghost, and yet their legacies ripple into the world we inhabit today. Carlos proved that terrorism could be branded, that a face, a name, and a cause could be stitched together into a media product. Long before ISIS posted propaganda on Telegram, Carlos understood the value of narrative warfare. He made governments dance to his tempo, not through mass casualties, but through symbolic disruption, what today's theorists might call strategic semiotics. Abu Nidal, in contrast, revealed the limits of pure violence. His campaign of slaughter alienated even his allies, his tactics becoming so brutal that even authoritarian regimes saw him as toxic. His story is a warning. When terror becomes indiscriminate, it loses its utility and its sponsors. But perhaps the most sobering lesson lies in the machinery behind them. Both men were not madmen in the traditional sense. They were products of systems, geopolitical instruments used by states who preferred to fight wars through proxies. Behind every attack was a wire transfer. Behind every ideology, a sponsor. Their careers force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Many nations condemn terror publicly while nurturing it privately. As we look to the present, where terror wears new faces, where ideology fuses with digital tribalism, and where lone wolves live stream carnage in real time, we must ask, have we truly evolved? Or have we simply rebranded the same machinery with better graphics and faster servers? Carlos and Abu Nidal are gone. Their tactics archived, their ideologies outmoded, but their impact remains encoded in how we police borders, define enemy combatants, and regulate surveillance. Their lives were extreme, but not exceptional, because what they built was not just an era. They helped write the operating manual for the 21st century chaos. Carlos the Jackal and Abu Nidal left behind more than a trail of violence. They forced the world to confront how terror is staged, sold, and sometimes quietly enabled. Their rise and fall aren't just history, They're a warning echoing through every headline today. So, what do you think? Is terrorism truly the weapon of the powerless, or just another tool in the hands of those hungry for power, no matter the cost? If you found this story thought-provoking, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and join the debate below. Would you say today's world is safer, or have we just learned to live with new faces of terror? Let's discuss in the comments.